Welcome to the Integrate This EdTech podcast. I'm Jeremy Mikla, joined by co-host David Berner, and we're excited to welcome our guest here today. We have Dr. Jean Kerns. Jean is the Chief Academic Officer at Renaissance. And Jean, we're welcome to the program. Can you help us out, give our listeners a little bit of background about who you are? How did you get into this EdTech space that we're engaging with you here today?
As you said, Gene Kerns, I'm with Renaissance, been here 20 years. Before that, I was a teacher. I am a third generation educator, and we're up to 5 generations in the family. So like biologically, there's like some kind of, genetic programming that we're going to work in schools. But, I think my ed tech journey started really early on because my brother-in-law was like early to bring computers home. So, first computer labs, and those were, sometimes Ataris. And I mean, just like way back in the early days of the first computers coming into school. But I didn't ever dream of working for an ed tech company. I just had so much success with Renaissance stuff in my district that when they approached me after a while and said, "Hey, you've done a lot in your district. Do you want to come work at the national level with us?" I'm like, I'll give it a shot. And 20 years later, I guess it stuck.
Yeah, having that longevity within your family of so many generations is rather unique.
Yeah.
Seriously, is there something in the water there?
Oh, I mean, it's kind of like I think you see some families that kind of follow the same professions. I mean, if I say my sister, now she's 22 years older, so I'm the by far the youngest kid. But when you're a kid and you've gone in and it's back to school, so you get carted up to the school while the teacher sets up the room, it gets comfortable. I mean, you kind of envision yourself and it's going to work there. So we've got some non-educators in the family, but the educators grossly outnumber the non-educators.
The nons, yeah.
Yeah. They don't
Um,
get to talk about work at dinner. We do.
right. Can you just briefly describe for us too a little bit of what Renaissance is, what Renaissance does, and in your particular role there too?
Yeah. So what's been very cool for me is 20 plus years with the company. So I've seen it really, really grow. So, if I started 20 years ago, I wouldn't say global. I would say now we are global in our operations. Back in time, we were really focused on just practice and reading and math. Now it's practice and assessments, probably our largest division. In fact, most people don't realize that Renaissance actually is the largest provider of interim and formative assessment tools in the English speaking market. When you understand that STAR assessments widely used. FastBridge is part of our family. We acquired a company called GL Education. They work in a lot of English speaking schools or British English speaking schools, both in the UK and then globally around international schools. So I don't think people realize that this little company that started in Wisconsin in 1986 with one product, the Accelerator Reader, is now a global ed tech provider specializing in assessment, practice, and instructional supports with our products like Nearpod and Vocabulary.
Yeah, and one of the things too, with obviously with a lot of the programs and things, there's always this balance of trying to make sure that the teacher still has some autonomy over
Yeah.
some of the things that they're doing with students, and that it's supporting both the teacher and the students. Can you speak a little bit to like what kind of things does, and you could put it in the frame of Renaissance if you want, or just in general, having it being in education as well, your background. What kind of things, in your opinion, should technology do for teachers? Like, what should be its kind of main goal?
Well, David, this is one that's really important for us. So, again, I've been here 20 years. I interacted with the founders of the company, Terry and Judy Paul, and there's actually a document that Terry wrote more than 30 years ago that actually kind of encapsulates ideas that we still use. And one of the things he wrote about is he said, "We pledge that our company will only produce things that represent the best use of technology." With his idea being, we're not just going to use tech because it's flashy and it seems fun. We've got to guarantee that what we're doing with tech is as good as or better than what a human can be, and that it doesn't supplant something in the process as well. So we are absolutely committed to two things that really kind of guide what we do. One is the best use of technology. The other one is keeping the teacher at the center. So we don't produce things that kind of like take over instruction and do a whole lot of things. Everything that we serve up is presented to the teacher as an option. And then the teacher gets to decide based on their knowledge of the student, which is always going to be more comprehensive than any algorithm or single piece of data coming off even a myriad of assessments. We are more about keeping the teacher at the center. And I mean, the other phrase we'll use is supporting teachers, not supplanting them.
Yeah, and that's a extremely important conversation right now too, just because we are having a lot of ed tech conversations about like what does proper technology look like or use look like in the classroom, and how much is too much. And there's a lot of data that's being brought forth too about you know ineffective versus effective use of technology in the classroom. One of the things that comes up as a positive is the ability to personalize learning. That's always been a pretty huge focus. Being able to help teachers design things in a way that so they can get to more students. And even with with AI, obviously that has increased even further, and you have that a lot more options and capability to do that. Can you talk a little bit about how important personalized learning is, and how like the Renaissance software helps with that?
Yeah, I mean, and I think we have to be really careful with that term personalized learning, because if you get 40 people, you're going to get 40 different definitions of what that looks like. So I actually prefer like learning that is more personalized. And what I mean by that is we have the same grade level expectations that we should be shooting towards with kids. They are starting at different points. So it's more about how do you support the kids who are starting at different places to get to the expectation you have for all, not letting personalized learning like turn it into completely different experiences. I mean, we're the adults in the room. We know what kids are supposed to learn. And, sometimes you got to eat your broccoli, and that's good for you. You got to learn some geometry along the way. You got to learn some algebra. These things are important. You may not immediately understand it when you're in algebra one, but over time you'll understand about math and unknowns and those types of things, and you'll see it out there in the world. So I get real nervous when personalized learning is any kid doing anything anywhere. We're more focused in on how do we make sure that our systems are aligning really well to the grade level expectations. And more recently, we've done a lot of work to align to individual textbook series. So a teacher can now tell our system, this is the book that I'm using, this is the unit that I am teaching, and then everything else that we do will be filtered through that lens. So we will present the most relevant assessment information for that unit. Oh, if you're teaching that unit to these kids, here's what you need to know about where they are starting, and we'll offer them the most relevant practice opportunities and the most relevant instructional materials. So, I think teachers, I never believed this idea that schools were a factory model. I mean, I get that we borrowed a lot from factories, but the minute a teacher tried to respond to a kid's need, whatever it was, the factory model was shattered. I mean, the minute that a teacher repeated something or helped a kid who was hungry get fed or presented it another way, machines don't do that. That's what teachers do. The challenge, however, is time marches on. So teachers are kind of like raging against the machine. So it's how do we balance this? We have expectations, but there's only so much time. So we're really focused in on how do we help teachers get as quickly as possible to the most relevant information, the most relevant activities, those things that are going to make the biggest difference for their kids in the shortest amount of time.
So, Gene, when I was in the classroom, which was, I just realized today that I've been at my current position now for 5 years.
Okay.
And, so I've been out of the classroom for that long. But it still seems close enough connected that I feel like I could still draw experiences from that time.
Yeah, you never
Um,
leave.
right, my brain is still all there, and and wanting to help kids and teachers the best that I can. But one of the experiences I remember, and being an instructional technology coach in the district that I was also teaching in, meant that I was always, like I felt like it was part of my job to constantly present tools to teachers or new ways of doing things. And not really considering that maybe at the time what I was really doing was creating more work for teachers because they were trying to
Okay.
learn all of these different tools and platforms and things. And several of them were very disconnected, and they were maybe just single use things. What sort of impact do you think that has on, or how do you try to find balance maybe within there about presenting new ideas and new things to teachers, but at the same time not increasing their workload and not preventing them from doing what's really important, which is connecting with kids and building great learning experiences?
Yeah, I think now, connecting with kids and great learning experience, there's a human element that goes beyond technology. But let's just focus on the technology piece.
Hmm.
I think a lot of your question is answered when you look at the conversations now that are sort of really trending upwards around instructional coherence. Like, we've all built these systems. We have the different parts, we have to have a tier one, and we need some interventions, and we need assessments because we have requirements around that, and we might need a social emotional. So we've got all these things. We buy all these individual parts. The question is, how well do those parts fit together? I mean, do they make a unified whole? So to your point, some new application comes out. Is it something that then connects in like hand in glove, and it kind of does something that could not be done before and it's highly coherent, or is it doing something random? So one of the things we're doing with our new Renaissance intelligence system, and even within our STAR assessments, is, and I alluded to this before, the ability for the user to say, I'm using this particular book in this particular, I'm on this particular unit. That allows us to filter out a lot of the noise. So, historically, schools give assessments, and every major assessment out there produces an instructional planning report. Here's all the skills within range of your kid. Here's the problem. If that assessment doesn't know what unit you're on in what book, the best it can do is just present a broad list of all skills. But if it knows what unit you're teaching in what book, then you can say, well, here's the assessment information relevant to this unit. You've got all these activities that kids could do that are very much constantly driven by EdTech solutions. Are those activities that are any way related to what's going on with the current grade level unit? If they are, then great. That's highly coherent. Okay, we're giving kids extension opportunities to continue to work on the topics that we're doing in the classroom. But if they're completely unrelated to the unit that's being taught, that might not be the wisest kind of thing. I mean, I use this idea of like systems. Schools buy the parts. They always buy the parts. We do that. We got to cover. We bought the parts. But it's kind of like saying I bought a screw and I bought a screwdriver. I didn't consider that the screwdriver was Phillips and the screw was a flathead, because just because you got the parts doesn't mean that your parts work together. So there's more and more conversations now about making sure that the various parts that we bring in, that they all work together in highly coherent ways.
And the same thing would work from the data that you collect from the assessments that you're giving. If it's all disconnected
Yeah.
and fragmented, and you've got, like you said, the flathead screwdriver and the Phillips screw, that's the same thing could happen with data that you're collecting from various assessments, right? And so if you collect fragmented data, are you then getting, and the teachers still look at that data, but does it lead to fragmented instruction where they're,
Yeah.
it feels like they're hopping all over the place rather than heading in a direction to improve learning?
Well, there's two things there. I mean, one is all the data coming to like one place, or are we losing information? So we do a lot with like
Hmm.
our Educommerce platform of bringing all the data together, because sometimes you'll find some interesting trends, like, oh my goodness, this student is always absent on a certain part of the day on a certain day of the week. Well, something's driving that. That's not random. I mean, there is some life issue that is causing this kid to be out of the building every Wednesday afternoon, and as a result, their grades are down. And if you can figure out what that issue is and help them address that, well, then grades are going to come up. But you wouldn't know that if you didn't have all of that data searchable together. But the other thing is, if we're not careful, being data driven doesn't necessarily help if the data that we're getting back is noise. And that's why I tried to make
Hmm.
this comparison of saying, yeah, I can have a broad instructional planning report that tells me all possible skills, but if I'm teaching a unit on geometry, I need information about the skills related to geometry, not statistics, not probability. I need information that helps me help my kids be successful with this grade level geometry unit first and foremost. And sometimes we get so much information, there's no shortage anymore, and sometimes some of that information isn't truly information from a systems perspective. People would refer to it as being noise. It's That's not helpful information. It's interfering with my ability to have clarity
Hmm.
about what I should do with this student.
So what could a district, what could a maybe even down to the classroom do if they're having trouble sorting out the noise from the quality stuff? Like
Yeah.
what can they do to really get to the heart of what's going to lead to successful improvement?
Well, I think it really is driven. There's some great reports out there around Coherence. TNTP, which is formerly the New Teacher Project, they've written a bunch of papers that are there. The Council of Chief State School Officers put out a paper in January that was titled Instructional Coherence at the State Level. And of course, that's likely to filter down to the more local things there. But I think when people start reading about that, they kind of begin this conversation of, wow, do the parts really fit together or not? Like, do we have a tier 2 program that is completely separate from our tier 1 program and a tier 3 program that's something else? In fact, one school system, Knox County Schools in Tennessee, actually they tested out like what would be more effective with kids in intervention. They started studying coherence. And so what they did was they took their kids who were in intervention and kind of split them into two groups. Half the kids just got what they'd always done, which was we have a tier 1, we have a tier 2, we have a tier 3. We built these things. They're part of our system. They may not be completely connected, but they're part of the system. The other half of the kids, they decided, let's do something highly coherent. Let's make sure that every part of the intervention experience linked directly back to what was going on in the classroom right now, that unit. So if you're the intervention teacher serving my students, you've got to know what I'm teaching right now to make sure that everything that you do in intervention supports them in what's going on in the classroom right now. What they found was the kids that were in that highly coherent intervention grew more, on average 1.3 months of additional growth on top of the growth rates that have been achieved at the base level just in interventions overall. So, in some ways, less work for teachers because it's just being drawn out of the core. But here's what I love about it. Let's say that you're the intervention serving my classroom, and David's a student of mine. If he's coming to you and you're talking about things that relate to exactly what I'm doing, it's more likely that as he makes his way back and forth between the two of us, it's going to all start fitting together. So you support him on some prerequisite skill that he needs to be successful with the unit that I'm teaching. And so he comes into my room and I start working on something. He says, wait a minute, we were just talking about this in the other room. And I think for the students, that's where it starts to build their confidence. They can feel like, wow, it's finally starting to fit together, because when schools have incoherent systems, when the parts don't fit together, our kids who have the most needs are the most exposed to that, because they're the ones that go into all those additional programs. And so if those parts are not designed or thoughtfully put together, the sad irony is our kids who need the most support are getting the most burden because they're cognitively shifting between all these different settings. Wait a minute, I'm doing a unit on geometry in my core classroom, but my intervention teacher is talking with me about probability, and I'm shifting between these, and that's very confusing and very difficult.
So, in that example, what is needed for those teachers, the interventionist and the classroom teacher, to get on the same page? Is it just a common prep or team time, or
Yeah,
are
I
there
mean, this
other ways to do that too?
here's an interesting one for administrators on the line. I read this one report that says, when it comes to coherence, teachers can't do this on their own. Like, they're going to need your help. Like, they don't
Mhm.
control all the levers that have to be pulled for this to happen. So there are documents from the United States Department of Education that talk about the need for there to be some joint planning time. I think in some ways that can be minimalized, because you know what? Most districts have their pacing guides in place. Like, they're pretty clear about what's going to be taught when. So it shouldn't require in-person meeting after in-person meeting after in-person meeting for the interventionist to know what the classroom teacher is doing. I think it's more about some documents and some resources, and then a touch base every now and then to kind of just talk about, hey, here's what I've learned about this student. This is going well, this is not going well. Do you have any insights for me? But I think, given the fact that most people have, I mean, they have their textbook series, they have their pacing guides. It's not a mystery, but we've historically had more of a remediation mindset, that is, well, we'll just meet the kid where they are and we'll work to grow them from there. We'll find what they need, what the next step is for them. And all this is saying, well, yes, but you've got to know what they're working on to the current grade level thing. So don't just randomly review everything with them. Review with them what they need to be successful at the grade level unit. If you're doing that, it's parts are going to fit together better for kids. And I think that piece is, the more that we're coherent, the more kids will move between those settings and find themselves gaining in their own confidence because the parts are fitting together. But we just don't serve up the parts that fit together at the same time. Let's serve up the parts that fit together at the same time, and let's get kids excited when those parts for them start falling into place and it starts making sense to them.
So, Gene, I'm going to try to give you like two different uh, scenarios here, I guess. One is like, so say you have a school that doesn't have any of your tools, right? What is the starting point for them to? Because I know you've already brought up instructional coherence, but what is the starting point for? Let's say you start working with this school that doesn't have any of the your platforms in use. Where do you start with that school at?
Do I get to sell them something, or I just have to start with what they have?
Yeah, you get to provide whatever way you want to take it. Yep.
Yeah, well, if they don't have any other stuff, I think it starts with just like an honest audit. Excuse me. Let's lay all the parts out and let's start having conversations about whether these things are designed or whether we've built any bridges between them so that they can potentially work together. For us, it could start in multiple places. A lot of our customers start on the assessment side, like that they've had us in their school because they needed to screen or progress monitor for MTSS, or they needed screening for characteristics of dyslexia or other requirements here. But here's what happens when you're an assessment provider. The minute the assessment is over and you give those scores, every teacher worth their salt will say, "What's next? Okay, you've told me these kids need these skills. How do I do that? Like what do you have? Do you have a lesson plan? Do you have an activity? Do you have a resource?" And that's where we're getting really excited in just connecting these things. So, for example, a couple of years ago, Nearpod, which is a massive collection of instructional resources, became
Mhm.
part of the Renaissance family, and that was a purposeful acquisition because we had the assessment piece and we wanted a better answer to what's next. Freckle is one of our practice applications. So, you can say to a teacher, okay, timeout. If you're teaching this unit and this kid needs more practice on the skills, here they are in this program. Just click here to assign them. And then the magic sauce is getting those things all to fit together in very nice, seamless ways so that for a teacher, it's super easy. And that's our new Renaissance Intelligence interface, where they don't even see individual applications. They see all of these things integrated together and presented to them through the lens of, you simply tell me what unit you're doing and what book, and then I'll just organize everything for you through that lens and with that perspective.
So then I guess it might be the case that it's a similar answer, but like the other scenario I was thinking of is, let's say you have a school that does have
Mhm.
some of your platforms, one or more, and then they've got where there has been some use, but because of like school leader turnover and different things like that, there hasn't really been any follow through. Where do you start with a school like that who has some things in place, but just isn't really sure how to like kick the thing in gear?
Yeah, let's hit two things there. One is we really begin to change our interfaces for multiple product users. So about 2 years ago, we released a new interface called Renaissance Next. That's the default interface for Star and the interface for people that have multiple products, so that they can see, oh, yes, when the assessment recommended something, then it will index it for them and say, well, over in Freckle, they could do this. Over in Nearpod, they could do that. With our new Renaissance Intelligence interface, the walls just go down. You basically get all the resources put together. So for a school that's in that situation, part of it is understanding these new interfaces. Another part of it is just like simply training. We've done a number of studies, and we're actually one of the, at least last time I checked, the only K-12 education provider that is a certified partner with the ROI, or the Return on Investment Institute. So they've blessed our methodology for a series of studies that basically say, what's the return on investment for the money you invest in one of our products? If you pay $1 for it, do you get $1's worth of benefit back, measured in a variety of ways? Here's what we found. Even 1 hour of remote training, just a little bit of training and support, often could make really sizable shifts in that return that schools get on their investment. Sometimes there's EdTech products that schools have bought, and you will find shockingly like massive numbers of teachers don't even know how to log into them. They don't even know that they are there. So you go in, just do the first couple of hours of training, and all of a sudden your metrics around that change radically. And then we've alluded to this earlier on, these whole conversations about you know uh, appropriate use of technology and what kids are doing online. We've got to be able to show that when kids are spending time, it is time that produces results, that there is efficacy. And again, we're very much committed to making sure that everything that a kid is doing online for us needs to be done online because it's doing something better than it could be done otherwise. And it's related to what's going on in the classroom, and the teacher is overseeing what's going on. We have no algorithms that like automatically assign pathways and work for kids that teachers aren't part of. And those things scare me. That's just always been a philosophical thing for me. I didn't like the computer lab that the teachers went to with the kids, and the kids logged onto a system, and the teacher came back 45 minutes later and picked them up. And if you ask the teacher what the kids were doing, I don't know. They did the program, but I don't really know what they were doing. Those things just don't feel right to me. I'm more about supporting people so that they're involved in the process. And I think as teachers, that's what we want. But it's got to be manageable and easy. And we've taken some huge steps forward in making just the interface and the way that teachers do their work daily something that is just so easy and intuitive to use that when they see it, they go, oh, yeah, I can do that.
Right, which is one of the biggest barriers, because it's like if you don't have a system that is like user friendly and it's low barrier entry barrier, it's like you kind of get overwhelmed right away by some of the things that are found there. So that's really important. I wanted to just quickly one other question is, and the Renaissance blog about that you did about instructional coherence, because I think you've already kind of addressed like why coherence is important, so that you can be more successful. But one of the things you mentioned in there is textbook alignment.
Yeah.
And why is that piece important? Because you had mentioned in there something about like how a lot of times teachers can abandon their standards a little bit, but the textbook is still used. So can you speak a little bit to that and why that piece of it's important?
Yeah. So a podcast is not the best place to like put images, but like imagine this. Imagine like a dashboard with all these like compasses. And I think that's what teachers are driven by. So they've got their standards, that's one of the dials. They've got their curriculum, that's another dial. They've got the assessment they use, that's another dial. If they're using a practice product like Freckle or IXL or Alex, that's another dial. If a kid's in intervention, that's even more dials on the dashboard. Here's the problem. Often for teachers, those dials, like no two of them point in exactly the same direction. They may point kind of in a general direction, but most teachers, if you ask them, they'll say, well, my standards say this, my textbook says this, I got information off an assessment, it says that. I kind of put it all together and kind of like make a path from there. Here's what we have to acknowledge. The textbooks among all of those dials, they probably exert the most power. And that's why I alluded to earlier that teachers don't look at the standards every day, but they look at their textbooks every day. Like that is going to decide in most classrooms, what are we going to do tomorrow? I mean, I have a pacing guide, I have to follow that. What that then means is for a company like Renaissance and the other companies that fill that space, we are supplemental providers. Now, we don't like that word because supplemental means like extra, and like assessment's really important, practice is really important. We get it. But the whole point is we should supplement the process. So if the textbook is so powerful that it can support the standards, then we have a decision to make. Do we align with or do we not align to it? Do we consider the pacing guide? Do we consider the units or do we not do that? And what we've come to is the point of saying that to not do that would be a gross mistake because this entity is going to guide much of what's going on in the classroom. So again, through our interfaces, tell us what book you're using, tell us what unit you're on, and we will refilter everything in the Renaissance ecosystem to serve up for you the most relevant information from our assessment, the most relevant activities within our practice tools, and the most relevant instructional resources within our tools like Nearpod and Flocabulary. And you don't have to go look for them. And what's exciting about doing this is we were presenting it to some administrators, and we showed it one time, and one guy said, you know what? There are teachers of mine that could have done this. Like they understood the parts, they knew how to put them all together. They could have done this, but they ran out of time. They didn't have enough time. And now you're just serving up all this stuff for them automatically. He's like, they're going to love it. He's like, but the other thing is there's a lot of teachers who would have struggled to do that if they're new to the field or new to the setting or they haven't used that product before. They don't know how to integrate all this. Now with the new Renaissance Next interface, I don't have to go look for anything. I tell it what unit and I tell it what book, and bam, all of my kids are grouped. These are kids ready for it. These are kids that will struggle with it. These are kids that are going to go through it very quickly. Here's resources to serve all three groups. Click here to assign it. Click here to, I mean, it's all right there in one place. Um, what we want to do is just like fundamentally change the daily planning that teachers are doing and make it easier. Because again, teachers want to respond to kids. They want to desperately, but the bell rang and I had to be on hall duty and I only got 45 minutes of planning. And so if you can help them do more efficient planning, they will do more for kids. And our belief is the only way that's going to happen is if you acknowledge the primacy of the role of those textbooks and you build it into your system. And so that's what we've been working on. And it's a big piece and it's growing. We have a number of textbook partners, and with every passing day, we're getting more.
Are you starting to see too, though, and I'm thinking of the teacher who maybe for whatever reason, maybe it's budgetary, restraints that they're not able to purchase the textbooks that they need, but
Yep.
instead, the teachers they're finding their open educational resources, and now they've been exposed to, like Notebook LM or Gemini Notebook as it's called now, right, where they can dump their sources in there, and they can now have AI help them create a more coherent, organized, that then becomes their textbook of sources that they then share out with their kids. Are you starting to see some more of that too?
I think there's some instances of that. And, in this first wave, what we've been doing is doing the alignments and the partnerships because that
Hmm.
represents the majority of the experiences that kids and teachers are having. We are going to build within our interface the ability for someone to put in their own scope and sequence. So if they're committed to, we don't use a textbook per se, but we have a curriculum, and these are the skills that
Hmm.
we're going to teach in these orders. We will have uh, possibly for next year, maybe a little bit beyond that. That is on the roadmap. We will have that in there. That's an interesting one and a challenging one. I mean, to me, Jeremy, it's not unlike the whole open educational resources conversation of 5 years ago. Because it was like, well, you don't need a textbook anymore. I'll just get all this stuff online. And um, I think it works for some, and I think it works in some specialized programs. I do have some concerns. And that's just based on, and I don't mean to make a formal statement here, but we had a superintendent who was an advisory board for ours, and his district like went whole in on that. And then some kids saw some lessons that had some problems and had some errors, and then all of a sudden the school board's asking, and not that that doesn't ever happen with a textbook, but sometimes those resources have gone through far more vetting than some of the other resources there. But I think either way, whether someone's using a textbook or doing something that they've created on their own, we will have the ability in the not too distant future for them to interface with our stuff, whatever way. We want to be the supplemental provider that actually supplements. I mean, that does so well, that brings in additional information, not noise, that brings in extensions to what they're doing, not distractions from what they should be doing. So we want to be the supplemental provider that truly supplements. And to do that means that you have to bring into your world a consideration of exactly what are they doing, whether that's a textbook or something else. If you've just got your own scope and sequence, and it's, we say alignment, our skill 23 is your skill 3.2.b. Look, we have a spreadsheet that shows you that. That doesn't make teachers' days coherent, but when systems reinvent themselves based on the reality that you're telling us, this is how we do it here, okay, that does make the day more coherent.
You touched a little bit on this, but I just want to bring the attention more focused on it. Your Renaissance AI. How are you intentionally integrating AI into your systems so that they
Yeah.
are more usable and friendly for teachers?
Yeah, a lot of that is sort of underneath the surface, behind the scenes. So we really have three forms that AI is taking. One is just AI teacher tools, and those are going to be what a lot of people see. So the ability to create a lesson plan, or to take a text and level it, or to generate a quiz or questions. And in that sense, that one portion of our work is not unlike work that some other groups have done. Now it's baked into our system, and I think it's got some great functionalities, but it's kind of like what they're doing. The other two pieces are our alignment engine and our learning engine. So for nearly 20 years, we've been building custom learning progressions for every state. So we take the standards, we unpack them, we know the skills in them, we know the prerequisites. when a kid has a assessment score of X and you're about to do unit number Y, if their performance level is below where they need to be, we can tell you exactly what skills are in between where that kid is and where they need to be. So yeah, I mean, here's an easy example. If you're going to do that 3rd grade unit on area multiplying length times width, and you have a kid that doesn't know multiplication, you're going to have to teach multiplication. Like, that's part of getting there. But, for whatever the skill is at whatever level, we have all this information in learning progressions. But again, teachers would have had to have sorted through that on their own. They could find their prerequisite skills. It took hours to do that. AI can do that really easily. So bam, basically our learning engine says, I know where the kid is based on assessment data. I know your standards. I know the skills, and I'll build a pathway. You tell me what you're about to do, I will build a pathway for every kid, and bam, the minute the teacher logs in, the pathway will be there. So that's the learning engine. Then the alignment engine says, okay, and if those are the skills that the kid needs to learn to progress from point A to point B to point C to point D, which is where they need to be, I'll serve up for you all the resources that Renaissance has or the partner has. So textbook companies that are partnering with us, and that's a growing list. For those that are partners with us, we will point to their resources as well. So, I'll just randomly, Envisions is one of our partners, so a kid took a STAR test, and for STAR Math, we could point to Envisions resources and say, if that's the skill you're working with this kid, here's a resource that you can use. So teacher tools, which are, very common kinds of things that people are seeing with AI, but then behind the scenes, this whole learning engine that is mapping the pathways that kids need to follow to be successful, and this whole alignment engine that is surveying all possible resources and saying, if those are the skills you're going to work on with kids, here are a resource that will help you navigate that step by step with them. We've had these libraries, we've had these lessons, these things were all over, but the AI is indexing them and serving them up as options to teachers as they decide exactly what path they want to take kids along.
So teachers can really view it as an efficiency tool, but also a tool that's just going to help them better connect the dots to provide the best experience that they can in the classroom.
And
right?
remember, we don't auto assign everything. Everything is a teacher at the
Yes.
center. So we're going to serve up the options. I view it as like my always on, never tired, 24/7 digital teaching assistant. Like, it'll
Mhm.
write the lesson plan, it will find the resources, it will make all kinds of recommendations for me. And then I, as a teacher, get to make the final decision on, okay, within these options, these are the ones that I want to use with these individual students or groups or classes, whatever level you want to take it to. We can support that.
And then I think part of that too then comes back to, teachers are feeling this push of the amount of screen time that kids are facing. But if you can show them that if they need to use this piece of technology, whatever it happens to be, to reinforce their learning, and it's going to do it in a way better than any other instruction I can provide, that's really what we're looking for, is the quality over the quantity here. And I'm showing you the quality of the amount of educational investment we're putting into it.
Yeah, and that whole screen time thing is interesting because, I mean, really what people are concerned about is one, social media. I mean, like I don't want a kid
Mhm.
spending all day on Instagram. But I think there's also this concern about the programs that do what I was alluding to when I say that don't reflect the best use of technology, the things that just take over and kids do a bunch of stuff and we don't know what's going on there. If you look at what many states are doing, they're saying, okay, we may have a screen time limit, but we're going to exclude some of the following things. We're going to exclude assessment time because we have to assess kids. There's some requirements there. Another big area, and this is the main point, is they will say, we will exclude from the time limits technology that is teacher directed, like things that kids are doing online that teachers have complete knowledge of and control of, that they have assigned, that they're going to be part of, that they're going to be mediating. And that represents a whole lot of what we do. Like we shy away from those algorithms that take over, and kids spend a lot of time without a teacher. So teacher directed kind of stuff, which I think again is far less concerning to people than, well, my kid logged on to program X and they spent 45 minutes over there and they either liked it or didn't like it, and the teacher did or did not know what was going on. That's where people get real nervous, I think,
Yeah.
about screen time. And that's why we're finding ourselves in the
And I
situation
think
where
that,
we are.
and I think in the situation too, where a student gets a reward because they finish something early. Oh, well, why don't you just go play on your screen over there?
Yeah.
And then that's the stories that come back that it's not being used in an educationally sound way.
Yeah. The pendulum swung. It's swinging. We got to get back in the middle. They only work in clocks, but we'll go through the swing and we'll go back to a more balanced world.
All right, Gene. Well, we appreciate everything that you provided as information, what you're working on, and with Renaissance. We want to go into our lightning round here just to get.
I've heard about your lightning rounds. I hope I'm ready.
Yeah. So we have the lightning round questions. Some of them are, maybe are going to connect to what we've been talking about a little bit, but we also like to add in personal ones as well to get to know our guests.
All right, I'm prepared. What do you got?
So Jeremy's kicking it off here.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Gene, what's a book or a show that you're into right now that isn't education related that you go to when you're getting away from the space that you work in?
We are making our way through right now Your Friends and Neighbors. So that's kind of been like the most recent show. And then like everything that Taylor Sheridan does. We just watched like season 3, episode 1 of Lioness. So that's the one we just kicked off there. So how that man writes all the things he writes at the rate that he does it, I do not know. But good Lord, he's got to be making some money.
All right, next one. What's a question that a school leader should ask of a vendor before purchasing or adopting an EdTech tool?
Yeah, efficacy research. And again, we present a lot of that through the lens of ROI. If I'm going to spend $1 with you, am I going to get $1 or more back? And there are ways to quantify that. And we need to know that the investments that we're making, because you know what? There's always going to be more needs than we have time or money in the bank. We got to make sure that every play we make is getting the return. So ask about that stuff.
So, Gene, you're taking a trip to a theme park, maybe like a Disney park or something along those lines. Do you map out a plan to maximize your efficient use of park time, or do you just go with the flow and what looks good and head that direction?
Well, that's an interesting one for me because I usually am a planner. Now, if you said we're mapping a vacation, it's going to be multiple days, I will map the heck out of it. Like I will, and that can be a bad thing, but I am a planner for something like that. I've never felt compelled to plan a park. I mean, there might be like there's a certain show we need to be out at 2 o'clock, but outside of that, I'll just walk and see how the lines are and go from there. So theme parks, I guess I drop my planning hat and just kind of go with them a little bit more.
All right. Next one is what is something that people would be surprised to know about you?
Oh, I'm an ordained minister. And if you've ever watched Friends, you think about like Joey getting ordained for $24.95 online to perform a wedding. That's pretty close to my experience. My now sister-in-law and brother-in-law were getting married, and his sister is a minister. So it would have been like everybody's like, oh, I mean, Megan's gonna marry you all. Well, they wanted her to just like be off duty that day, just be part of the bridesmaid. So like, well, someone else has got to marry us. So somehow my sister-in-law got this idea that I'd get ordained and I'd do their wedding. And what she overlooked was that yes, the ordination's good in 48 states, but New York City requires more. So I had to go to the marriage office in downtown New York to sign this book. I'll tell you, if you've ever got like just, even half an hour to kill extra time in New York, if you go to the marriage office, it's the coolest thing ever because there are people that are dressed up. They're in their tuxedos. There are people in sweats, and they are every age and shape and size. Some are getting their marriage license. Some are having the judge marry them. I like the best people watching in the world occurs in New York City's marriage office, and I am registered in the big books, 48 states and the city of New York. I got you covered.
Well, perfect. If my wife and I ever decide to renew our vows, I'm going to call you up and
there you go.
We'll get you, maybe meet you in New York City.
There you go.
Okay, so let's say David and I are having a conference tomorrow, and you're going to be our keynote speaker, and we want to make sure that the crowd is all pumped up and ready for you to walk out on that stage. What's going to be your walk-up song?
Oh, they ask me that sometimes for our big sales kickoff, what I'm going to walk up to. I think right now I'd do The Future's So Bright. That one's Future's So Bright, I got to wear shades.
Yeah,
I'm really excited about where we are. I've been in Renaissance for 20 years, and like what we're doing right now is some of the most exciting work. I mean, we are really bringing things together in incredibly intuitive and easy ways. And the ultimate test is people are responding. I mean, like we really started launching this new system in January, which is not an ideal time because schools don't make their buying decisions fast. But we had like an incredible number of schools like decide and make the priority to get the funding and do it for this year for back to school. So it's resonating, and so I think the future is bright.
All right, and it's by Timbuk3, I guess. So I'm gonna add it to our playlist. We have an integrate this guest playlist.
I think it was an '80s one. Maybe it's a different one. It was Huey Lewis. What Huey Lewis?
Oh, is it Huey Lewis?
I gotta
Okay.
wear shades.
I'm glad I said that then.
I'm a child of the '80s, so it had to be an '80s song.
Okay, yeah, I'll find the right one because we do have an integrated.
Yeah, be careful. It could have a wrong mix. Like Gene told me to play that one.
Yeah, well, because it gets added to our guest playlist on Spotify.
Oh yeah, so let's be careful. I'm pretty sure it's like Huey Lewis or something like that.
Okay, I'll find the right one. Yeah. Okay, so our last segment here, Gene, is just this or that. So it's rapid fire. Got to choose one or the other. Notebook, paper, or a notes app.
Notebook, paper.
Podcasts or music while traveling?
Podcast.
Mountains or beach?
Mountains. Just back from them.
Text somebody or call somebody?
Text.
And then the first to leave the party or the last to stay?
First to leave.
All right.
Well, Gene, you survived it. Appreciate your time and sharing your experiences with us here today. Yeah. So thank you very much. Before we do let you off the hook here, is there anything that you would like to share for the listeners? Contact information, links that people could go to, or any upcoming events that you want to promote?
Oh, sure. I mean, check out what's going on with our company right now. So Renaissance.com, and particularly look for the stuff around Renaissance Intelligence. It's really exciting. I mean, it's one of those things where just give us a few minutes to show you. And I think in just a few minutes when we show you what we've done, you'll be like, oh yeah, like that really works. And like I said, the test has been the number of schools that even when we were launching this, in late in what would have been the year buying process, that we're still saying, yeah, we're going to make that a priority because that's going to really change everything. So visit us there. I've got my LinkedIn page. You're welcome to follow all that kind of stuff. But really check things out at renaissance.com. You can go there /webinars. They'll tell you, you'll see the history of the webinars and all that kind of stuff, what's going on, and /blog. You'll kind of see some of the ones you guys referred to. We've got the standard stuff there, and it's just exciting stuff going on. So I appreciate the time to come and chat and just kind of riff with you all a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. We'll link some of those into our show description here as well. So again, just thank you so much, Gene.
Thank you. Appreciate it.